I'm Liam.
I'm Wayne,
You're listening to In Film We Trust YouTube.
a place where we post clips from our recent episode.
All links down below in the description.
And now, on with the show.
It's a very interesting phenomenon, the cult film, isn't it?
It's one of those things you can never gauge what's going to be a cult film or what separates your mainstream fare, low budget fare, or cult fare. What do you think? Is there any characteristics you detect in a cult film?
Well, not so much the characteristics of the film. The thing I always notice is there are a lot of films which go unappreciated in their time. Maybe they're big box office flops or they're critical flops. But there's something about them you think, I think this will be reappraised later on, like maybe it was the right film at the wrong time, for example.
What I always notice, a lot of them, especially from back in the mid-20th century, you had like Russ Meyer, you had John Waters, you had these kind of directors who were working on a low budget, but their vision was singular. When you watched a Russ Meyer film, it was big tits and a bit of action. You knew it was a Russ Meyer film. With John Waters, it was the Pope of Trash kind of quality.
It was insanity, because do you ever see Pink Flamingos?
I did see.
Because I remember watching that. For me, it was cult in the sense that I watched it thinking, I don't like this film, but I can totally understand why somebody would enjoy it.
It endures because there's a taste.
Mm.
It's a taste was specific to a certain audience.
Or a tastelessness.
Tasteless.
If you're talking about Pink Flamingos, yeah, but like I say, these movies are looked on later on. They're given they're introduced to a whole new audience, so maybe that audience at the time just wasn't ready for them.
Because that's one of those things, it's like there's films with a huge audience, but because it's too expansive, you can't call it cult, really, can you? No matter how dedicated that audience is.
No, generally speaking, like your big budget blockbusters don't become cult films because they're films that just like endure all the time for good or bad. But cult films are the ones that kind of sneak in below the radar, you could say.
For a lot of examples, there's almost a trash quality to a lot of cult films, isn't there?
But I guess at the time it's when things are just written off as trash, like maybe Caligula, because that was written off as just being shameless, vile trash. But now people look back. I know people who've said that's their favourite film.
Well, you've got Malcolm McDowell, Helen Mirren.
Mm-hmm. John Gielgud, Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, you've got all these high-budgeted actors in...
Basically like a big screen porno.
Essentially, but to be fair, that the explicit scenes were added after the fact by the production. The actors didn't know that they were going to be in.
Because it was funded by Penthouse Magazine, wasn't it?
Because it was originally, their first screenplay was by Gore Vidal.
Gore Vidal, yeah.
And he hated the version on screen.
I'm guessing it was just twisted beyond exactly what he wanted, because it was Bob Guccione.
Yeah.
Was the man behind the helm.
From Penthouse Magazine.
I watched Caligula. I remember just being really bored by Caligula. I felt like a lot of the exploitation was just filling up time.
You got a lot of them in the 70s, them kind of sexploitation films.
Yeah, they did, like Deep Throat.
Yeah, well.
Deep Throat, there's one of the most famous ones.
Isla, She-Wolf of the SS.
She-Wolf of the SS, yeah, again, just naked exploitation films. Sallow was another one.
But then you get these higher budget fares, or by esteemed directors like the Coen brothers. You have Big Lebowski, which probably wasn't destined to become a cult film, but it underperformed so much, wasn't it?
It did. It's got its own festival now.
Yeah, and now it's a huge cult film.
It is. Again, maybe it just wasn't understood because people look back at it now. Even critics who gave it a bad review are looking back like, maybe I was too harsh on it when it first came out.
I think that's what it is, and that ties in with like Silver Lake. With Silver Lake, Under the Silver Lake, you have, to me, its closest brother would be Donnie Darko.
Donnie Darko, yes.
There's a thematic resemblance, not necessarily in plot, but the themes of the psychologicalness of it, and Southland Tales, which was also Richard Kelly's other film, the director of Donnie Darko, and that's the film I can closely see this resembles.
As in, like, when you were watching it, it had the same feel, it had the same atmosphere kind of thing?
It's setting up a mystery that even after watching and the plot is resolved, there's still a lot to unpackage. And I find with this film, even when you realise the ending, and there's a certain way it's tied up, there's still a lot of things to unpack.
Yeah, like, you could go back and watch it and you see things you hadn't noticed before, and that almost kind of brings you more into the film, because like, right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to find what I didn't find before because I was too busy paying attention to what I thought was the central storyline, for example.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. It's like, when I watched this for the second time, this is a film, actually, which makes a conspiracy net of the average viewer.
Yeah, it does.
You want to deep dive this so much, and when you look and find up, and you realise how much stuff is coded throughout the film, it's astonishing.
So many films, I'm sure yourself, so many films you've seen which have all these hidden layers and they've got all these kind of coded messages. There's some really famous ones, like, for me, the most famous one would be something like Mulholland Drive.
Oh, yeah.
Because David Lynch has refused to tell anybody what it's about. He's like, it can be about whatever you say it's about. In fact, I think on the set of the film, someone would say, what exactly is this film about? And Lynch would say, well, I guess we'll find out together.
Which I don't know. I think they're being disingenuous there. I think the filmmaker themselves have a solid intention and a solid intent for the film. They just want the viewer to find it out for themselves.
They know exactly what the point of the film is, but they do it in such a roundabout, sideways direction that you could go off in 1,000 different directions.
They leave enough ambiguity for the the viewer to interpret it their own way.
Yeah, and not even things with just like hidden messages, films that are kind of heavily metaphorical. Like, did you ever see the Spike Jonze film Where the Wild Things Are?
I did, yes.
Yeah, that's like, again, that's the kind of thing where this boy goes off and he meets all these big monsters and you think it's just this fun fantasy, but no, it's about a boy who's going into this fantasy world to escape this real trauma that he's going through in his life.
All these films have a lot to unpack. It leaves an endurance for the audience member to want to keep revisiting that.
Yeah.
This isn't fast food. You're not going there to watch it once, forget about it, and that's it.
It's not a popcorn flick.
No.
No, and it doesn't even have to be a good film. Like, did you ever see Troll 2? Like,
I've never saw that.
One
no.
of the most famously bad films of all time, because that's about these goblins who essentially feed humans this food that turns them into vegetables, and then the humans eat them.
Yeah.
That was written because the director, well, one of the screenwriters noticed so many of her friends were becoming vegetarians, and it really annoyed her. So she wrote this. So this dreadful film is a critique of vegetarianism.
Or you get these random ones like The Room.
The Room, yeah.
The Room was intended in Tommy Wiseau's mind to be a serious, a Streetcar Named Desire type drama.
Yeah.
But it ended up being so bad.
Yeah.
And it's almost like now it's repackaged as it's in on the joke.
Because he intended it as this serious love triangle, and he only started saying it was meant as a black comedy after it came out
Yeah.
and after the reception, because there's no way you'd be positioning that as something comical, something satirical.